High in the Ural Mountains of Soviet Russia lies a cold, silent stretch of wilderness, windswept, desolate, and untouched. This is the northern face of the Ural Range, specifically an area known to the native Mansi people as Kholat Syakhl, or Mountain of the Dead. In 1959, a group of 9 experienced hikers set out into this unforgiving terrain, aiming to reach the peak of Otorten. They never made it. What followed became one of the most chilling and enduring mysteries of the 20th century, one that would leave behind torn tents, mutilated bodies, and far more questions than answers. This is the Dyatlov Pass incident. And remember, viewer discretion is advised. The group of 9 hikers consisted of students and graduates from the Ural Polytechnical Institute in Sverdlovsk, now Yekaterinburg. All were experienced in backcountry hiking and skiing, and most had already earned their Grade 2 hiking certifications. This trip, if completed, would elevate them to Grade 3, the highest certification in the Soviet system at the time. Here's who they were. Igor Dyatlov, 23, the group's leader. An engineering student, disciplined, brilliant, and admired. He had led many similar expeditions. Zinaida Kolmogorova, 22, energetic and determined. Zina was known for her endurance and sharp mind. She had a close friendship with Dyatlov. Yuri Doroshenko, 21, previously dated Zinaida, physically strong and brave. He once fought a bear with a geologist's hammer on an earlier expedition. Rustem Slobodin, 23, a long-distance runner and mechanical engineer, known for his quiet, thoughtful demeanor. Lyudmila Dubinina, 20, the youngest of the group. She was outspoken, politically active, and tough. On a prior hike, she had been accidentally shot in the leg but finished the journey anyway. Alexander Kolovatov, 24, a nuclear physics student, quiet, intelligent, and secretive. Yuri Krivonyshenko, 23, the joker of the group. A fellow engineering student, he worked at the Chelyabinsk 40 nuclear facility during a radiation leak just a year before. Nikolai Thibault Brignoles, of French-Russian descent, he was charismatic and athletic, a natural leader. Semyon Zolotaryov, 38, a last-minute addition, a war veteran and ski instructor, older and somewhat mysterious. He was not part of the university group, but had the credentials. Note, a 10th hiker, Yuri Yudin, began the journey but turned back due to illness. He would be the only survivor. Understanding who the hikers were matters in understanding that they were not fools walking to their deaths. They had a wealth of experience guiding them in these conditions. The group set out on January 23, 1959. After boarding the train to Ivdel, the last inhabited outpost before the wilderness, they hitched a ride to Vizhay, the last village on the edge of civilization. From there, they began their ski expedition into the frozen north. Their journals and camera rolls provide a window into their journey. The team appeared cheerful, determined, and well-prepared. On January 31st, they cached extra supplies in a wooded valley to lighten their load before heading into the mountains. On February 1st, they veered off course due to worsening weather and poor visibility. Instead of turning back or detouring to a more sheltered forest clearing, they stopped and set up camp on the exposed slope of Kholat Syakhl. Why? One theory is that Dyatlov wanted to practice camping on a slope as a training exercise. Another is that they lost daylight and decided not to descend. But sometime that night, something went terribly wrong. Late in the evening or early morning hours of February 2nd, something alarmed the hikers. Their tent, still partly standing, was cut open from the inside, as if in haste. Whatever frightened them didn't allow time to unzip the entrance. They fled into minus 30 degrees Celsius conditions with little clothing. Footprints show they walked, some barefoot, some in socks, downhill toward the forest. At the tree line beneath a massive cedar tree, Krivonyshenko and Doroshenko built a small fire. Their hands were badly burned. Perhaps they huddled too close in desperation. The tree above showed signs of broken branches as if they'd climbed it for a better view, or to escape something. Nearby, scraps of clothing were found, torn from the bodies of the dead to help others survive. A short distance uphill, the corpses of Dyatlov, Kolmogorova, and Slobodin were found one by one, frozen, face down, facing the tent. They had no major injuries. It seemed they had tried to crawl back. It wasn't until May, when the snow melted, that the final four were found in a ravine, over 70 meters from the cedar tree. Zolotaryov and Dubinina were found together. She had no eyes, no tongue, and shattered ribs. He had a crushed chest and was clutching a camera with no film. Thibaut Brignoles suffered a massive skull fracture. His injuries were likened to being hit by a car. Kolevatov's neck had unusual damage, and his skin appeared strangely discolored. Strangely, some of their clothing showed traces of radiation. No one could explain why. One of the most chilling elements, despite the chaos, there were no signs of a struggle, no wounds consistent with hand-to-hand violence, and no other footprints, only those of the hikers. The search teams were haunted by the scene. A group of elite hikers, experienced in survival, had fled their only shelter in the night, into certain death. To break down the sequencing into clear evidence, the hikers' bodies were discovered in three main stages. 1. Near the tent in the snowfield, the bodies of Dyatlov, Kolmogorova, and Slobodin. These three were found face down, closer to the tent, appearing to have died from exposure while trying to return. Their injuries were lesser: abrasions, frostbite, and early signs of hypothermia. 2. At the cedar tree along the forest edge, the bodies of Krivonishenko and Doroshenko. They were found under the tree, barefoot, with burns on their hands and legs. It's believed they tried to start a fire to survive and may have climbed the tree, possibly to look for the tent, or help, or to escape something. 3. In the ravine, 75 meters deeper into the forest, Dubinina, Zolotaryov, Thibaut Brignol, and Kolevatov. These were the last four found, months later, buried under several meters of snow. They had the most severe injuries, including crushed chests and skulls with no external bruising, missing eyes, tongue, and facial soft tissue, sometimes attributed to post-mortem scavenging animals, or natural decomposition in running water, as the ravine site may have included snowmelt or a shallow stream. But experts argue the surgical precision of the damage and lack of blood at the scene continue to spark doubt and suggests otherwise. Signs of internal bleeding, indicating they were still alive when the trauma occurred. It wasn't until February 20th, 1959, that alarm bells began to ring. The hikers had missed their planned return date. Family members, especially those of Igor Dyatlov, pleaded with the university to begin a search. Initially, officials downplayed the urgency, but by February 26, a volunteer search team, composed of students, teachers, and even Mansi locals, stumbled across the tent on the icy slope of Kholat Syakhl. What they found was horrifying. The tent had collapsed, but was still partially standing. It was slashed open from the inside. Snow had partially covered it, and the hikers' belongings, boots, jackets, food, and journals, were still neatly placed inside. There were no immediate signs of violence, but the footprints outside painted a grim picture, a barefoot or barely shod flight into the night. Over the following weeks, search teams, now joined by soldiers and government investigators, found 5 bodies. The final 4 weren't discovered until May 4th, after spring thaw revealed a snow-covered ravine deeper in the woods. That group had the most devastating injuries. The case was officially opened by Lev Ivanov, a Soviet criminal prosecutor. His team conducted interviews, autopsies, and extensive documentation. But their tools were limited, and they were under increasing pressure from higher authorities. The investigation lasted just over 3 months. Ivanov ruled that the cause of death was due to an unknown compelling force, a vague and chilling phrase that seemed to say everything and nothing. The files were promptly archived and classified. Officially, the Soviet government offered no further explanation. The mountain was made off limits for hikers for several years. Behind closed doors, Ivanov later admitted to being pressured not to mention any military involvement. He even claimed strange lights in the sky were part of what he believed could be a weapons test. The families were devastated and suspicious. Most never believed the official story. Memorials were quietly erected. Journalists and curious minds began to collect what evidence they could. It wasn't until the late 1980s and early 90s, during the Soviet Union's collapse, that portions of the Dyatlov files were declassified. But large gaps and missing photographs only fueled more questions. Yuri Yudin, the 10th hiker who turned back, spent the rest of his life trying to solve the mystery. In interviews, he expressed guilt, grief, and an unwavering belief that the truth had been buried. He once said, "If I had a chance to ask God one question, it would be, what really happened to my friends that night?" The Dyatlov Pass incident has spawned countless theories through the years. Some rational, some not, and some are just chillingly bizarre. Let's break them down. First is the avalanche theory. This is the theory also supported by the Russian government, as noted in their 2019 reinvestigation. The idea is that a slab avalanche, a large block of snow breaking away from the slope, crashed into the tent. This would have forced the hikers to cut their way out and flee, fearing more snow would follow. In 2021, a scientific paper published in Nature used computer models to support this idea. It demonstrated how a small but powerful slab avalanche could occur under the right conditions, even on the relatively shallow slope of Coldest. Crucially, it could cause severe internal injuries while leaving little surface evidence, mirroring those found on Dubinina and Zolotaryov. Skeptics note, the tent was still standing, and no obvious avalanche debris was found. Yet the combination of high winds, snow loading from above, and the hikers' own trenching in the slope could have created the perfect storm. This theory is now widely considered the most plausible by many researchers, but not all. The second theory is the katabatic wind theory. Katabatic winds are sudden, powerful gusts of freezing air that rush down slopes. These winds can reach hurricane speeds, capable of knocking over skiers and flattening tents. Some believe such a wind hit the campsite, collapsing the tent, or threatening to do so, forcing the hikers to cut their way out and seek shelter in the forest. In the dark and confusion, they may have become separated or succumbed to exposure. This could explain the panic, but not the catastrophic injuries or radiation. Third is paradoxical undressing and hypothermia. As the body shuts down from hypothermia, it can enter a state of confusion. Victims often feel overheated and begin undressing, a phenomenon known as paradoxical undressing. This theory explains why several of the hikers were found partially clothed, but it does not account for the traumatic chest and skull injuries, nor the slashed tent, nor why they left their shelter in the first place. The fourth theory, radioactive fallout. Some of the hikers' clothing, particularly garments worn by Krivonychenko and Zolotaryov, tested positive for elevated levels of radiation. This raised eyebrows immediately. Why would radiation appear on ski wear in a remote mountain range? One explanation connects to Krivonychenko's past. He had previously worked at Chelyabinsk 40, a top-secret nuclear facility known for radiation leaks, just 1 year before the Dyatlov expedition. This was one of the Soviet Union's most secretive nuclear facilities, notorious for radiation leaks and accidents. Could he have unknowingly brought contamination with him? But then there's the more chilling possibility, that the hikers wandered into an area tainted by radioactive materials, perhaps from weapons testing or disposal of nuclear waste. The Ural region was not far from such experimental zones. Importantly, the radiation was localized to specific items, not widespread among the group. This suggests direct contact with contaminated objects, rather than an environmental source like snow or windblown fallout. Some have theorized that the hikers came upon classified equipment or munitions, and were silenced to protect state secrets. Others point to the timing, the immediate sealing of case files, and the vague cause of death ruling, unknown compelling force, as hints of a larger cover-up. The radiation wasn't strong enough to be fatal, but in the tightly controlled world of Cold War secrecy, it was damning. And combined with other strange clues, burns, orange skin, missing organs, it helped birth some of the most unsettling theories of all. One possibility is that Soviet radioactive waste disposal or a secret weapons test left trace contaminants in the region. However, the radiation was found only on select garments, suggesting localized exposure, not environmental fallout. The levels weren't high enough to be lethal, but were alarming nonetheless. The presence of radiation, combined with sealed investigative records, fed into darker theories. Theory 5. Infrasound in the form of Kármán vortex street. This theory suggests that strong winds passing over the dome-shaped ridge of Kolatsyakal created a rare aerodynamic phenomenon known as the Kármán vortex street, a series of swirling air patterns that can generate powerful infrasound waves. Infrasound refers to low-frequency vibrations that are below the range of human hearing, but they can still affect the body and mind. Exposure has been linked to sensations of dread, disorientation, and even panic attacks. Proponents of this theory argue that the hikers experiencing these effects were overcome by intense irrational fear and fled their tent in terror. Confused and in extreme conditions, they were unable to regroup or return in time. While the theory is supported by physics and terrain modeling, there's no direct evidence these conditions occurred that night. Still, it remains one of the more science-based psychological explanations. The next theory, Theory 6, is one of the most widely believed unofficial theories. This is the Soviets' secret military testing. Some researchers believe the hikers may have stumbled into a Soviet weapons testing zone, perhaps during the detonation of parachute mines, chemical weapons trials, or high explosive tests. Parachute mines are particularly intriguing. They detonate in midair and cause powerful concussive injuries, internal trauma without surface wounds, just like those seen on Dubinina, Thibaut Brignol, and Zolotaryov. Adding to the suspicion, several residents of nearby towns reported seeing strange orange orbs or floating lights in the sky around the time of the incident. These sightings, though dismissed by Soviet officials, are eerily consistent with airborne munitions tests. But that's not all. Search teams noted charred treetops as if scorched by an aerial blast. Some of the recovered clothing carried traces of radiation, and Dubinina's injuries were so severe they resembled those of a blast victim, not someone caught in a natural disaster. Autopsy photos and forensic notes also contained peculiar inconsistencies, missing organs, strange skin discoloration, and signs of extreme pressure. When prosecutor Lev Ivanov later admitted he was pressured to omit any military-related conclusions, suspicions deepened. There were known Soviet military bases in the general region, including sites where parachute mines and rockets were tested. Some even speculate the hikers were mistaken for trespassers or spies. The area was immediately closed off after the search, and the files were classified for decades. Many believe this wasn't just tragedy, it was containment. The secrecy did not help to deter this theory. Though no documents directly confirm a test occurred that night, the convergence of injury patterns, radioactive evidence, eyewitness reports, and secrecy gives this theory substantial credibility among independent investigators and conspiracy theorists alike. Theory 7. Mansi tribespeople. Early investigators briefly considered whether the hikers had been attacked by the Mansi, an indigenous people native to the Ural Mountains. The Mansi had inhabited the region for centuries and held spiritual beliefs tied closely to the land, including certain peaks that are considered sacred. There were whispers that the hikers may have unknowingly trespassed on forbidden ground, sparking retaliation. However, there was no historical record of the Mansi committing acts of violence in defense of their territory, and certainly not anything resembling the brutality found at Dyatlov Pass. Fundamentally, the Mansi were known to be peaceful. More importantly, there were no signs of struggle, no weapons, and no evidence of third-party tracks. In fact, the Mansi actively assisted the search parties, guiding investigators through the harsh terrain. This theory, rooted more in fear of the unfamiliar than fact, was quickly dismissed due to lack of supporting evidence. Aliens, or supernatural forces, make up the 8th theory in our story. It may sound far-fetched, but some locals genuinely reported unidentified flying objects on the same night the hikers died. Glowing orbs, some described as fireballs, moved silently across the sky. These sightings were corroborated by multiple witnesses in nearby settlements, including military personnel. Some searchers later claimed to see burn marks in the snow, and charred treetops, as if something from above had unleashed a burst of energy. Early reports described several of the bodies with an orange tint to their skin, prematurely gray hair, and strange burns, symptoms suggestive of radiation exposure, or something far more exotic. The mutilations were particularly disturbing. Dubinina's tongue and eyes were missing, as were the eyes of Kolevatov. While scavengers could be to blame, some experts believe the soft tissue damage, especially to internal organs, was far too precise. Combined with the lack of external injuries, it has led some to believe these were surgical in nature or caused by directed energy. Believers point to the combination of factors: the tent violently cut from within, the scattered and terrified flight pattern, the high radiation clothing, and the extreme internal injuries with little outward trauma. Add to that the missing organs, the sealed records, and the strange aerial sightings. The overall lack of a logical explanation points to something beyond human comprehension, and a case emerges for supernatural or extraterrestrial involvement. The area's chilling name, Mountain of the Dead, only deepens the sense of foreboding. While no physical evidence confirms alien contact, the surreal nature of the scene, the brutality of the deaths, and the remoteness of the location have enshrined Dyatlov Pass as a prime location in UFO and paranormal lore. The next theory is a Yeti or cryptid attack. Perhaps the most outlandish theory, but it gained traction after a Discovery Channel documentary. Some point to cryptid tracks or shadows in photos. Interestingly, one of the hikers jokingly wrote in his diary, "From now on, we know the snowman exists." Likely a joke, but it became fuel for wild speculation. A psychological breakdown leading to murder-suicide makes up our 10th and last theory. A lesser-discussed theory suggests that one of the hikers suffered a mental breakdown, possibly triggered by cold-induced psychosis, extreme stress, or a previously undiagnosed condition. The idea is that this individual became violent, attacking others and causing panic in the tent. The ensuing chaos may have led to the group fleeing the tent, either in fear or while trying to subdue the attacker. In this scenario, the internal injuries and missing soft tissues could be attributed to interpersonal violence or even post-mortem trauma from an unstable group member. Skeptics of this theory note that no defensive wounds or signs of struggle were found on the bodies, and there was no evidence of infighting among the group's journals or behavior leading up to the incident. Additionally, it would be difficult for a single person to inflict such extensive damage, especially crushing injuries akin to car crashes on multiple victims in a short span. While unlikely, the psychological breakdown theory remains a grim reminder of the fragility of the human mind under extreme conditions. All theories remain just that, theories. Each one describes parts of the story, but not all. Will we ever know? Today, over 60 years later, the Dyatlov Pass incident remains an unsolved enigma. A brutal, frigid night lost to time, buried under snow and secrecy. Were they victims of a freak natural event? An experimental cover-up? Or something stranger still? Whatever the truth may be, it died with those 9 young souls on the slopes of Kolatsyakal, forever frozen in mystery. Let us know in the comments below. What do you think happened to the hikers on the Mountain of the Dead in 1959? Or do you have another theory, perhaps one that could fill in all the missing pieces, answer all the unanswered questions? If that's even possible. Like and subscribe for more true stories from the edge of the unknown. Until next time, keep your eyes open, and your mind even more so.